Welcome to the Power of Design podcast. My name is Jack Osa. I'm an architect, born and raised in Colombia, South America. Years ago, I migrated to the United States to follow my dreams, and today I'm the founder and principal of Osa Studio, a multidisciplinary architectural design firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. In this podcast, we talk about design, business, creativity, and the inspiration we need to create an exciting and powerful built environment. Today, we have a very special episode focused on the practice of architecture. This is a conversation with three very interesting people who transition their traditional role as architects to become thinkers and contributors of a deeper conversation that explores technology, operations, and marketing in architecture. Joann Liu, Chris Morgan, and George Valdes are part of Monograph, a project management software for architects and designers. I use Monograph to run my firm and love how they use their digital marketing content to add value to their community. This is my conversation with Joann, Chris, and George. Welcome to the Power of Design podcast. Today we have a very special episode. We're going to focus on the practice of architecture, marketing, technology, and I have three very special guests today. So I love for you guys to introduce each other. Let me know what you do, why do you think this is an important conversation, and we'll take it from there. So why don't you go ahead, George?
Cool. I'll start off. So I'm George. I'm the head of marketing at Monograph. My background is actually in landscape architecture and architecture. Worked at different firms before transitioning to work in tech. I worked at different startups, focused on AEC. Most recently, worked at WeWork, where I was part of global growth strategy. Joann.
Go ahead, Joann.
Okay, so I'm Joann. I am part of the marketing team as a content strategist at Monograph. Previously, I was an architect and I'm still a licensed architect, but I have been in architecture for 10 years. Before Monograph, I was a Gensler for about 6 years. And I also have founded the Women Architects Collective, which is a community for women in architecture with like over 3,500 members. So I'm very excited to be here. And I'll let Chris introduce himself.
Yeah, so I'm Chris Morgan. Every week I interview architects at Monograph and write down their insights and share them with the broader architecture community. My background's in architecture. At Monograph, it's the first time where I can bring together these three different worlds that I've been in for years, but they've never sort of like coexisted in the same place, which is technology and engineering. So like software engineering, programming, business, and then architecture. So it's amazing. Being on this team is an amazing experience to be able to bring all these different disciplines that I've been developing for years into one place. And the way I see it is I see my mission as spilling over all the best parts of tech into architecture so that all of the different professionals in the architecture industry can have sustainable careers and professions throughout their whole career.
That's exciting. I have a traditional architecture practice and I've been always very passionate about technology. We have 3D printer, we do VR, Enscape, we're very heavy on BIM. And I'm always very interested about that conversation of how technology is really impacting not only the way we practice, but also the way we build. And I think it's very interesting that you guys have that career path where you practice architecture, you know what this is about, and then you're on the other side driving the tools to help them develop, better tools for architects. So I know you guys, as part of Monograph, you guys put together a conference called Section Code that happened, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Tell me a little bit about the conference. Why did you guys feel the need to create that conference, and how was that experience like?
Yeah, so early on, we knew that, and by we I mean the founding team, which also comes from architecture: Robert, Mo, and Alex, and myself. Before we had even brought on Chris and Joann, we had talked a lot about the importance of community building within architecture, and specifically around the people who probably have a lot to share but don't have really clear avenues to share, and that's the people that are in office management roles, in operational roles, where it's like you can think of like the directors of operations, managing directors, people who are focused on the business rather than in the business. There's a lot of communities around tooling, right? Like there's a big Grasshopper community and Revit community, where people can share tips and tricks, but that doesn't really exist so much in the operational world. And so we wanted to create a place, and at some point early on, we were thinking about creating a place or a time or a place to bring together everybody to talk about these things and openly share them. Part of that inspiration also came from the world of tech in general, where there's just so much more openness around sharing these things. You can go to a conference and learn how someone at a very fast growing startup, like the actual tools that they used, the actual screenshots of their tool and how they're using it. And that kind of openness we felt was just missing within the industry, which actually could lead to a lot of other consequences, meaning um, not having a community where you can really see what other people are doing means that it's harder to find talent that might fit you, right? So there's less opportunities for talented people within the industry to move to other firms, which is also a big source of career growth. And that happens a lot in tech, right? There's this kind of like ability to share, makes it easier for you to find. You get to build your own personal brand in a sense, which is a net positive for the industry because it just means people keep learning and sharing ideas, and there's a consistency of fresh things happening. So that was a big kind of catalyst for it. I'd say also once Joann and Chris joined, there's also an opportunity of like, how do we tell interesting stories from our customers as well, and have them also be part of this kind of um, sharing culture. So it's not just bringing outside people to come in and talk about what they're doing, but also highlighting the voice of our customer as well. And I think those two together have made for like an amazing event, um, for not just um, Monograph in a sense, but also for the community. Because I mean, we got a ton of praise for the kind of programming that we did and all that.
Yeah, that's very refreshing. As a business owner, I can really see how there is a huge void in the profession, and it might be because traditionally we focus so much on projects and design and execution, and when you work for a firm, that's pretty much all you do. You're never exposed to the business side, and then once you start your business, you start doing the same thing. You focus on design and production, servicing your clients, but then you start realizing that there is a lack of understanding on operational excellence, how you do leverage tools, how do you use finances, metrics, dashboards to really take the business to a place where it would allow you the freedom to scale if you want, but if not, at least to have a very, very profitable business where you can execute you know design strategies and have a good life doing what you love. Joann, why don't you tell me a little bit about you as a content strategist, which I will think it's everything related with digital marketing, digital media. How do you think that's impacting the architectural profession, and what kind of techniques do you use to help architects engage that area?
Yeah. I have I can have so much to say about content, but I think I think architects in general are still not utilizing the whole online space as much as, let's say, the tech industry is, or even any other industry like the fashion industry or the um, marketing industry, as well as just like social media or having a blog, having content like you're doing with a podcast or on YouTube. There's just so many different types of content that architects could leverage um, as part of their marketing strategy. And from my own experience working in different sizes of firms, most of an architecture marketing team focuses on creating proposals, creating just the PDF proposal that you send out to clients to
Yeah.
pursue the projects. And sometimes maybe just updating their website with new projects, new project photos, but it's not really focusing on building the brand of your firm and also just an online presence utilizing everything we have nowadays, like social media and any type of content. So I think there is still a huge potential for a lot of firms to really take advantage of digital marketing and content marketing to market their firms.
Yeah, do you think there is some generational component, in the way we engage with technology? Maybe um, younger generations that they grew up with technology, they feel more comfortable, sharing, expressing not only who they are but what they do through their social media channels.
Definitely, I see a lot of content creator in the architecture space that are either in school right now, like in architecture school, or they just graduated school and they just feel like they want to share their experience as, someone new in the workplace or someone still going through architecture school and sharing that kind of experience. But I don't see a lot of people sharing, let's say, the business side of architecture, but even as an architecture firm sharing content to try to attract clients.
Yeah.
We see that actually a lot in like more of the interior design space. I feel like the interior design space has done more showcasing their projects really using Instagram or Pinterest, stuff like that. Um, and not as much in the architecture space.
Sure. Yeah, I think there is a lot we have to learn from other industries, just service-based
Mhm.
industries, that they feel a lot more comfortable with other conversations, and especially, sales, marketing, and branding. I always wonder why in
Right.
architecture firms you don't have, sometimes you don't have salespeople or business development people. It's you're just expected to sell, in your free time, or how does that work? That's very common in many other
Right.
on other industries. So, Chris, what do you tell me about your perspectives in terms of branding, marketing, business development, which I think traditionally is not very popular in architecture. As I was saying, you're expected to sell and get projects, but I feel that now we're getting into a stage where we're feeling more comfortable sharing the value that we really bring to society. And I think we're missing out in a lot of uh, opportunities and even fees, because we don't know what we're selling. We think we're selling drawings or permit packages, and we lack the ability to explain our target clients what's the real value of the thinking that we bring to the projects. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so much to say, so many different aspects to that. Um, I mean, I would say here's one way to put it. Um, you step into architecture school, the whole experience is unlearning everything you thought about architecture. I always think about how I even have this even when I talk in the past, have talked to clients who, or people like in my personal network, for example, who knew that of my background in architecture. I always think about how when they think when people who don't have an architecture background think, well, what do you think about as an architect? you think at first as a layman or a layperson, it's like you memorize all the detail names and there's this whole aspect of like, what does it mean to go deeper into architecture when you're a layperson? And architects understand that from school, you actually abstract all of architecture to better understand it. And you reframe everything about space so that you can use it as a material for creating and generating form, for working through complexity. And I think that a similar process is required for architects with how they approach their conception of business. And I would say the most interesting aspect of business that's least understood is marketing. I'll kind of try to speak to an example. I find that so that you can almost describe two parts of business fundamentally: ops and business development. I think that that's kind of generally how architects sort of divide them up. How do you get new projects? How do you deliver projects? And I think what's sort of interesting is now Monograph sits in the ops side. They sit in the operations side. Like, we're really trying to deliver efficiency in the operations side. But the marketing and business development and sales, growth, like all the different terms, to basically, they're all there to reframe what that means, because so many people have so many embedded conceptions of what that means. It's difficult for them to like untangle that. But I would say that that's like my ground foundation, is like a lot. Try to work through like all the things that you think that marketing is, think that sales is, and all the negative associations you might have with it. How are you going to unpack that so that you can actually work with those fundamental tools of business without sort of, I'm kind of speaking sort of like to someone who has controls over the business, who's found themselves having controls over the business of their practice and is having trouble like navigating the marketplace. I think a foundational part of this on the marketing and sales side is like, what misconceptions do you have and how are you working through them so that you can innovate on that whole side of the business. Now, we don't talk about this so much because like our focus on Monograph is on the operations, but I would say like that, I don't think it's difficult to move forward in being productive with architects if you haven't like given the discipline of business the same kind of thought process as to give to architecture.
Yeah, and I think when you realize that, we buy things all the time. We're all consumers, and people don't buy products or services. They buy experiences. They buy how they feel when they're interacting with that product or service. That's why there is always a luxury market for any product, and people pay 10, 20, 50 times the cost of something that you can find the same thing with lower cost, but we want to be associated with the brand, right? We have all these reasons to pay more because it's this brand and we feel good about it and I love it. And I think that's one of the transformation that you guys are part of, is helping architects understand that what we're selling is not these drawings or not even the designs, is the experience the client is going through when they're working with us, and how our designs are a solution to their business, to their problem. It's a vehicle to take them to the next level. And I think that's really opening a huge opportunity for the architecture industry to clarify the message and give everybody a unique story that they can leverage to be compensated accordingly for that.
Yeah,
Yep.
I agree 100% with what you're describing too. Is like the shifting expectations of clients, right? I mean, clients are consumers, and so everything, like their mental model for how they think about approaching you as an architecture firm is going to be the same as like them evaluating the next speaker system that they're going to buy, right? They're going to do a ton of research online, try to learn as much as possible so that they can have an informed opinion before they come to you. And no matter what stage they think that that is an informed opinion, right? But they're going to put in their time to figure that stuff out. So in a world in which services are fighting as commodities, how do you rise above the noise? Brand is critical to that. And nowadays, how we think about brand has also changed. Before, brand might have been like, people might have associated brand with like, oh, it's just the website and it's the logo and it's like, you know, that's it, right? But it's even deeper than that. Nowadays, brand is almost like atmosphere. It's much more about all the different ways in which someone can come into contact with you. In a world in which today corporations are seen as people, there's a reason why there's like Wendy's and Slim Jim have a very interesting voice on Instagram, right? There's like how they talk, the tone of voice. That's all even part of what we consider to be a brand. And so, in how you differentiate today, it's really focusing on all those different touch points. And Joann mentioned some of them, right? Like she talked about how YouTube is not really leveraged very well as an opportunity. Podcast. I mean, I think Jack, what you're doing here is leading the charge, right? It's very innovative in that sense of like someone with their own practice fostering this conversation, and maybe even bring it back to Monograph and our idea of community. If you were to actually, even as a firm, like just step back and take a good hard look at what Monograph is doing from a marketing side, there's a lot that you could apply to your own business. Like we throw Section Cut, right? We talked a little bit about how that's a community for a specific group of people. There's no reason that if your bread and butter as an architecture firm is high-end luxury hospitality, there's no reason why you can't start a podcast. There's no reason why you can't start a YouTube channel where you're interviewing those people that are in like those like owners, right, of high-end hospital, like those developers for high-end hospitality projects, and getting them to talk about their challenges so that there's now a community forming around those people. And with that, your brand is critical to that conversation. It's helping to foster that communication. So, we do it because we come from the industry often, right? And we are really addressing the same people that we went to school with in some cases and all that. So there's like a really tight connection there. But even if you're just starting out and trying to build your own audience around this is where you start. It's just like by having a real invested interest in the concerns of the people that you're trying to sort of galvanize around your service or whatever, and find out what their challenges are. And I think this is like, a lot of those different touch points we talk about are just critical to let's say, a new playbook for marketing today.
Yeah, that's exciting, and the beauty of technology is that is the democratization of information. Maybe in the past I needed to pay for an ad to go to a radio station in order to show and be able to tell my message. I don't have to anymore. I can do it for free. And even podcasting, I'm always very impressed how I just had a PodTrack P4. This is a great podcast recorder, and it was like $250 brand new. So with $500 you can set up yourself a professional podcast studio, and that's all you need. I mean, you just need to pay for the hosting, but the cost to entry is very minimum. It's only the the dedication, the time, the energy, having the ability to schedule and to do it. So there is no barrier to entry to this game of marketing and leveraging digital technologies to do that. Yeah, Joann, can you tell me a little bit about what have you seen in the architectural community? What are some good strategies that people are using to be better at content strategies for their architectural practices?
I would say for content specifically, I feel like everyone probably knows this, but if you look at 30 by 40,
Mm-hmm.
who has a massive YouTube channel, and he I mean, the latest content he's making is already talking about retirement. But basically, he have built such a big community for himself, not just, to get clients, but also inside the architecture industry. Then now he's teaching architects that are watching him how to start a business like he did, but also at the same time how to leverage content online to add revenue to your business. So instead of just providing architectural services, he's now selling courses, selling templates from his like Revit library and stuff like that. And I think that not just taking content or online marketing as a way to sell your services. I mean, that's important because that's your bread and butter, but then you can also use it once you have built up an audience, when you have built a community, you can use it to start a conference. Like we didn't charge for it. I mean, we didn't charge for it, but
Yeah.
you can totally charge for it. You
Sure.
can start a podcast and get sponsorship, and you can sell courses and do all these things that are outside the normal architecture service, but it gives you a different income stream and not just relying on that, like working hour by hour and charging hour by hour type of work. And I think that's where most architects haven't utilized yet in the online space, as I see. And 30 by 40 is doing a great job at it. And I see a lot more, younger architecture students are doing it as well. They're like selling their Notion templates for like $3, and it's still like a nice little income for a student, right?
Sure.
So it's just kind of utilizing the online space. And like George was saying, focusing really on the type of clients that you want to talk to. I was actually in a Clubhouse room before, when Clubhouse first started. I was in a room talking about personal branding, and there was this architect asked me, what kind of content can I create, or what type of community can I build that would actually attract my clients, instead of, because most architects, when they create content, when they build their brand, they just talk to other architects, or they talk to their peers, because that's how we learn to talk in architecture school. We have all this language that we talk to our peers. But she was like, what kind of community can I build if I'm trying to get clients for my firm? So like George was saying, if you specialize in restaurants, for example, that's your bread and butter, that's like your specialty, designing restaurants, start a Facebook group of people that love restaurants, or restaurateurs, restaurant owners, or chefs, or start a podcast interviewing chefs, start a YouTube channel reviewing restaurant designs. It's like there's so many possibilities that you can do to build the community you want online, because not every single person in your community is going to hire you. But the more people you can reach, the higher probability that someone, when they finally need that restaurant to be designed, they will think of you. And that's, I think, where architects could go going forward in terms of community and content.
The Power of Design podcast is brought to you by OSA Studio, a multidisciplinary design firm focused on creating impactful experiences through the power of design. We partner with our clients to create buildings, interior spaces, brands, and strategies that help you deliver a successful project. As a minority-owned firm, we are committed to building a diverse platform of curious and driven design professionals so we can together pursue our full potential. For more information, please visit us at www.osastudio.com.
Sure. Yeah, I'm definitely betting on that. I started this podcast, The Power of Design, about 2 years ago. I'm recording with you guys episode 51. Yeah, 51. And it's very incredible. I think, it's been a very exciting experience, just the ability to have these conversations, to expand my network, to learn. Even, I don't pay a lot of attention to my metrics, but just the value that I get out of talking to smart people that know a lot more than what I know, it's crazy. And now, even connecting with your team, we probably will never met face to face in our lives, but I know who you are. I'm learning. We have these connections. Many things can happen out of this. So the exponential value of putting yourself out there and leveraging the technology to enhance not only your practice but your career is definitely important here. Is there anything in terms of operations that it's beyond technology that are you guys addressing in terms of, like, behaviors, helping firms have discipline, to have strategies in place, to have strategic planning, meetings, how to structure those things with the data firm? Is that part of the conversations you guys are having internally?
Yeah, I think, I mean, not even just internally, just with our own customers as well. Like at Section Cut, we profiled some different customers at different sizes, different types of businesses and organizations, everything from nonprofits to much larger firms. In the U.S., we had one interesting customer, Shane Balcom from Rossman. It's sort of my go-to because his story is very unique. Comes from the tech industry, has had different roles in the tech industry, and gets headhunted to be part of an architecture firm. First thing that he does is actually it's all operational, but also all about setting up rhythms and what he would call like the cadence of reviewing metrics, of basically, at that sort of at that high level of metrics, but then also at the very individual level of having one-on-ones. And I actually just want to kind of just talk about one-on-ones for a minute, because I think that's, if you ask an architect at a 50-person office and above, who do you report to? You'll likely get a blank stare for a bit, because they're thinking and they're trying to figure out, if is it their studio director or is it the project manager on the project, and they can't really tell you with full confidence, like, oh, I actually like direct line report to this person. And what that actually signals is that there's no opportunity for feedback at the kind of scale that someone actually wants and someone should get. So what a one-on-one is basically, in our team here, I have one-on-ones with Chris and Joann and the rest of the marketing team on a bi-weekly basis for 1 hour. So fully dedicated time for our team members to be able to tell us, leadership, what's on their mind, what is, and that can be from personal to career to like things that they're working on, and they just need some sort of advice or idea. And I just from the conversations I've had with both Chris and Joann, these have been really positive um, practices to have, right? Operationally, they're not waiting till year end for there to be this review where we sit down and then I'm bringing up a laundry list of things that I felt they could have done better, or they bring up a laundry list of things that I felt that could have happened all the way last year. Do you know what I mean? So if that kind of regular cadence of 2 weeks can unlock for, if the investment of time can unlock for them a new way of making decisions, a whole new attitude, perspective on a subject that was really bothering them, that now they don't have to think about anymore, or whatever. I've just increased their productivity to be able to focus on the right things at a higher rate. They're also more engaged because they feel they're listened to. And by the way, I mean, this is also stuff that I went through myself when I was working at different like places like WeWork, where I had regular one-on-ones, and I saw the power of that, and that's kind of part of why we brought it here. But going back to Shane, he brought that on board in his firm. installed a director of operations to manage all of the stuff that project managers were doing, remove their plate from like having to think about accounts receivable, all this other stuff, and really focus more on like, hey, let's institute a quicker feedback cycle so that people can grow faster. I think that if someone was listening to this and they were like thinking like, what's the one takeaway we could probably have from this,
Yeah.
even aside from marketing, would be like, okay, I need to like install a one-on-one cadence with the team here, because that's probably going to be the highest leveraged activity I can do tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it's so simple that I think it's just underestimated how powerful it is. You know how big of a change can you do just by implementing that behavior. Chris, I'd love to know from your perspective. You know, overall, when you go to architects on architecture firms' websites, they look all the same. You know, very generic. We all put the projects, and we all put the same buzzwords, and we're all saying the same thing. You know, everything is the same. So when a client is just doing some research and looking for something, they find a very even landscape. What do you think it's a good way to really differentiate yourself, and show your unique brand story, not only on your website but in your general, you know, digital presence?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple tiers to think about this on. I would say like there's one level where you're the local architect and you show up in Google search results and you're kind of like the equivalent of someone Googling a general contractor. The assumption is you're a competitor. You're in a competitive landscape. If you want to transcend all that, you have to win on brand. And what that means is win on work, but it doesn't just mean your portfolio work. It means the whole environment of what the concept of it means to enter into your context. I think that context is one of the best, easiest ways to understand what brand is. I mean, if you understand what an architectural concept is, you understand what brand is. It's something that's in your mind. It's something that you remember about something. It's reputation. It's your memory. You're forming a memory, a distilled memory. It's a concept, right? I think the very first thing is invest. If you're not investing in quality, unique representation of what it is like to step into your world as you know, say prospective customer, prospective client, or something like that, you're just in the commodity game. So the entry point into this is to work with, you know, invest in design, invest in the design of the experience. Huge missed opportunity. I mean, it's laughable that people are still not doing that, but that's like, of course. I would say the next level of that, though, to go beyond, is to think more about, imagine yourself as a client. There is so much work that clients have to do still in order to make sure that a project succeeds. The amount of information that they feel they need to collect for you, you know, think about being on the client side. I think there's so much that happens repeatedly in practice that if you make it more systematic, it frees up new possibility for innovation. Onboarding a client so that they feel ready to move forward, that they don't feel like they have to collect so much information before they press go, right? That's kind of the classic pre-construction problem, especially for contractors, where because there's this really long sales process, they don't really have you get stuck with, well, I have to have everything ready before we start to engage each other. You know, I mean, that's really a contractor problem. In architecture, you know, so certain firms have solved this, where you can sort of enter in a light engagement to explore the problem space together. That's definitely one. And depending on how you've worked that into your sales process or present that as an offering, there's aspects of that could be more systematic in what it's like to engage beyond oh, I'm interested in this firm. So of course, like going to the website, the first step is to try to create contact, right? To try to encourage them to contact you. Or if they're not ready to contact you, you want the user to be attached to your activity. So that's through social media. But I would say that another way of approaching this is, what can you do? What can you put on your website that's sort of like a form so there's an app called Typeform that does a great job of making forms more visual. So you could do something you can put some form together that's more visual, that helps a client navigate the problem space of their project. Whether if they're residential, it's envisioning their new home. If it's a business client, then maybe envisioning some aspect of what their current plans have been so far and what program requirements they're setting up. I think tapping into a prospective customer's planning process and systemizing it, and it ends up turning it into qualification data.
Mhm.
I think that's people are missing out not thinking about that. It's like there's a lot of tools to help you do that. That's my first thoughts on that whole question.
Yeah, I feel like it's leveraging the technology to start helping solve the client's problem. So even before you're engaged, they realize that you have tools that are facilitating their understanding of the problem and how you're going to add value through your service to help solve that problem, in a way that is easy and user friendly.
Yeah, there's a piece of that too about like that's not technological. It's just, have you done the work to really understand the full journey of your prospective client from when they first think about potentially the type of service you're offering, right? So if we were a residential architect, have you really mapped out in your local area what are all the kind of like basically the step by step, right? The workflow of like a client first thinks about buying a new home. Next step, they go on Google and they search for what's it take to build a new home in Austin, Texas. The first article that pops up should be an article that's hosted on your website that says, here are the top 10 things you need to understand. And that's like classic SEO.
Mhm.
But even that, right, is like starting to put yourself in the shoes of the client, like as Chris was saying. And how do you design then that experience for them? So you're building trust along the way. They start to only think about you because you're the architecture firm that gave them the super simple spreadsheet to like organize like all the steps that they need to do for thinking about buying a new home or building from scratch a new home or renovating a home, right? Any type of process that might be involved. There's a way that you're helping them make decisions faster. And if at some point they need to make the decision of hiring an architect, well, guess what? You've already had the relationship. They already know about your work. You've already been adding value to them in something that cost you maybe a couple of hours to put together to start, right? But now that 2 hours of investment in making that downloadable Excel document for a potential client is now an asset, right? That just like can live on your website, and the cost of it is, the ROI is huge.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, it's still just about like, how do you streamline that whole thing? So now that you've unpacked it and you understand all the questions that they might ask along the way, you have all the answers ready. To Chris's point, how can you use tools like Typeform or technology to then streamline even that whole journey for them? So that if you've ever signed up for a service like Stitch Fix, where it's like the first thing you do when you're creating an account is you get to pick the type of clothes that resonate most with you, because everyone has a different style. But maybe you present to the client like different types of projects in a type form. It's like, hey, do you really enjoy mid-century modern, or do you enjoy this type of design or this type of design? Guess what? At the end of the day, you might not be interested in providing Mediterranean homes for a potential client, but at least you know from the very beginning of them filling out that form that, oh, this is really what's top of mind for them. plus everything, and you can then make the decision as to whether to engage, whether you're the right fit, or whether you should refer them to a friend of yours that actually does that type of work.
Sure.
So I think that's like, if you step back and just really map out the entire journey of who you're trying to attract, what questions they're trying to answer and all that, and then implement technology to streamline critical parts of that process that are beneficial to them and to you, that's a really clear strategy that someone could take away and improve the experience, right? And improve the, as Chris was saying, like, how do they get into your context, into your working environment, ways of working?
Yeah, and to do that, you don't need to be on a large firm with a huge marketing budget. You can be a one-person firm. Might be, I don't know, 3-4 days of work, and you can set that up without much effort or money either. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. So you guys are the forefront of on a very interesting conversation. Pushing the architecture practice. At the intersection of technology, operations, design. What would you guys think? And this will be my last question for each of you. What would be for you the ideal situation of the best practice of architecture when you're fully implementing your ideas, leveraging technology, let's say in the next 5-10 years? How do you guys see the practice of architecture in the future?
I can kick it off.
Go ahead.
I think there's going to be, much as we talked about today, about the client experience as it relates to marketing, business development, all that. I think we will see a really interesting evolution of what we mean by client experience in the next 5 to 10 years. I think what's going to happen is that services will become more like e-commerce in general. So whether it's you go to a law firm or a doctor, all these things are going to be abstracted where the experience is more like it's better for the client because it's almost like they get to see in real time updates. They get to understand where the product is at. They don't need to communicate with you synchronously in a meeting to understand where things are going. It's all accessible to them. Every firm, smaller firms will be able to punch up and compete against larger firms, not necessarily on price, but just on the client experience that they're offering. And that's going to make a big difference in the landscape in general, because it will be something that they'll be able to do hopefully through tools like Monograph.
Awesome. How about you, Chris?
Let's say fundamental belief I have is almost all problems that people are talking about in architecture, about working conditions, is because people are not embracing the business world. It's so important to understand this. We leave school with no regard for the business world at all. In fact, there's almost like a strong distrust of it. But you end up with certain firms that are highly regarded academically who have some of the worst working conditions. They have not figured out the business at all, right? So I would say that, like, because of all of this, you've got a lot of people leaving this industry. It's not sustainable as a profession, and if they're not leaving the industry, they're leaving firms. So they're starting their own firm. They're starting their small practice, which is very difficult. And it's difficult in those small offices to create opportunities for other professionals. So you have this bad cycle of kind of poor, even to use that word, like poor businesses, poor business activity, widespread. Not really any regard academically to solve this problem. That's fine. That's why Monograph is here. That's why there's different ways to learn, But I would say that, like, what I would love to see, and through my career, it's a big mission of mine, is to make it possible to not only have a sustainable career, but to have a very successful career in architecture. And I think it all comes down to total rethink of business, which has happened in tech. That's the big thing. Tech has really changed so much business practice. We're still benefiting from that. How come it's so incredible to work for a tech company? How come you make so much money at a tech company? It's not just because technology, however, that is a part of it. There's a lot of margin in technology, but there's all sorts of innovation that's happened in tech in terms of how to rethink business in general so that there's full alignment between all the levels in the company. That's why I kind of bring it back to this mission to spill over all the best parts of tech into architecture to support all professionals so that they can not just like stay in business but thrive in business as an architect.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think we're heading that direction for sure. Yeah. How about you, Joann? What do you think will be the future of architecture practice and especially leveraging content strategies?
My hope, I don't know how to follow after Chris' mission here, but my hope for the architecture industry with all the technology we have, with platforms like Monograph and with a good operation system, is that we'll have a more transparent culture, which is something that we always talk about at Monograph as well and at Section Cut is something that again the tech industry is doing really well and building a culture where firm owners are not afraid to share how much money they're making with their employee. They're not afraid to share, even people in like employees themselves are not afraid to share how much salary they're making between themselves. And I think having that transparency is how you have a culture as a firm that motivates your employees to like want to do better. Because if you share with them like, hey, this is our profit this year, we 3x it next year, like it gives them motivation and it helps them become part of your firm and feels like they belong to the business instead of just sitting at the desk drafting for one project, and they don't feel like they're engaged in any sense when it talks about business or the management of the firm. The same thing goes for like I'm talking about like the business side, but if you talk about the operation side, a lot of people, I think the new generation, they have ideas and they want to make the workflows of architecture better because we have all this new technology. And I always say this is we have tools like Revit, which supposedly help us draw faster, but we are spending the same amount of time as if we were going to draft in AutoCAD because we haven't spent the time to really understand how our process works and take all these ideas together and make the workflow more efficient in design, but also in practice, in the operations world, where what kind of tools, what kind of technology you can use. And I personally really do hope that all these tools and technology and practice operations that we talk about a lot at Monograph will help firms have a more transparent culture, but also like a more healthy culture like Chris was talking about, so that people can work more efficiently but not work more hours. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's a very exciting and empowering vision of of the future you guys have in mind. You guys touch on every single point of a you just described the perfect farm where everybody wants to work there, and I would love to get to the point to experience that at some point in my career. Well, Chris, George, and Joann, thank you guys so much for being here in the Power of Design podcast. I really value your expertise and your ideas, and please keep doing what you're doing. You guys are making a huge difference in a lot of people's lives without even realizing. And part of that is all the effort you guys are putting on digital marketing and efforts through LinkedIn, Instagram, the podcast. I'm definitely consuming all that information, and you guys have already added incredible value to my life and my firm.
Thanks so much, Jack. Really appreciate you and this podcast and the opportunity to be able to speak here about some of the things that are top of mind for us.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Thank you for listening to the Power of Design podcast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review if you like this content, and find us online at thepowerofdesignpodcast.com. I invite you to join my mission to become a better version of yourself through the power of design.